Diffusions. It's important to have some when you're shooting outdoors, not only because, well, it'll make it easier to see things, but more importantly, it'll make your subjects look more flattering. Now, unfortunately, there isn't much I can do about me. I am the whole package. But when it comes to dealing with the harsh sunlight, there are varying fabrics that you can use with varying degrees of thickness that softens those shadows and makes the subject look more pleasing. The thicker the material is, the more diffused it is. I mean, that's just logical. A thick material would have less light transmitting through it compared to a thin material like a sheer curtain. Now, you would think that the sun being the harshest source of light in our solar system, it must therefore mean that you have to use the maximum amount of diffusion, right? I mean, it only makes sense. You want to take those like edges off your hard shadows. So maximum harshness, maximum diffusion, right? Right? Well, actually, no. I don't even know where they landed. When it comes to shooting outdoors, you gotta know when to hold them and when to fold them, because there is such a thing as too much diffusion. Now, what do I mean? What's up, fellow procrastinators? I'm Flamecom. So the other day, my half-stop grid cloth from Westcott finally came in the mail, and now I have an almost complete set of diffusion cloths from Westcott. I'm going to be showing you 3 configurations, each with increasing increments of diffusions, and I'm going to be showing you why more diffusion, especially when it comes to shooting outdoors, is not actually the answer. Now, one caveat I do have to bring to this experiment is that I'm not able to control the direction of the sun, because between each of those configurations that I'm showing on screen, I'm going to be taking the time to swap out the fabrics. So that is one variable that I haven't been able to control. But the one variable I have been able to control is that all the camera settings are the same, so that you can see, given the same camera settings, how the exposure changes, right, when I put on different fabrics. So now let's actually switch over to the half-stop grid cloth, which I've thrown over there somewhere into the ether, or the black fog if the latest Xenoblade trailer is anything to go by. First off, it's completely rubbed off. I need to relabel that. The half-stop grid cloth from Westcott. Let's whack that on. Oh, man. If that was a Sony camera, that would have already overheated like before I even brought it outdoors. I kid. I like Sony. I actually DP'd using a FX3 late last year, actually. Maybe it'll go to St. Kilda Film Festival. I'm actually not sure. No, Inner West Film Festival, actually. And yeah, I've shared details about it on my Instagram, actually. Go follow me there. It's called WOMBO. It is a horror that I DP'd on. Fittingly shot in October, actually, now that I think about it. All right, let's bring the camera back over here as I talk to an imaginary PA. Okay, so as a control test, the settings are f2.8, 180-degree shutter, ISO 800, daylight, white balance, 25 FPS, so make of that what you will. Okay, now let's put the half-stop grid back on from Westcott. Yeah, and then just like that, okay. Oh yes, and I'm also on a 4 stops of ND, internal ND. Okay, so don't change any settings at all. Yeah, you can immediately see it's like the catch light that is produced in my eyeballs, like this huge like square source, because it's a square 6x6. I'm quite close to the diffusion itself in that it's like, what's that, 2.5 foot away. This is the half-stop grid cloth, and this is yeah, what it's done to my face. Now, why do I specify my face? Well, it's important because I'm talking about the exposure on my face relative to the background, which is oh so very bright. Feast your eyes upon this as I get bitten by mosquitoes. And look at the exposure on my face relative to the background. Yes, folks, this is what I was getting at. But before I talk to you about the obvious conclusion as to what happens as I stop down on more and more lights, let me actually show you, let me actually demonstrate to you the effects of putting on more and more diffusions when you are outdoors. I'm sure some of you smart brains out there have already rubbed two brain cells together and have already figured out what the conclusion I was gonna draw. But yeah, let me just put on the full stop silk cloth. I feel like in this trade, what you find yourself doing an unhealthy amount of is just staring right into the sun, especially as you're like waiting for breaks in the cloud and so on. You find yourself looking up in the sky, just like sacrificing your cornea, just to be like, oh, okay, we got like 10 seconds until the sun ducks behind that gap in the clouds, and meanwhile you realize you're straight up staring at like the brightest source of light in our solar system. Sounds like a healthy career to really dig your heels into, huh? All right, the sun's moving very quickly. It's gonna eventually be like on that side of the camera, so I gotta move quick. But this is the full stop silk from Westcott. And unfortunately, I don't have a light meter. Believe me when I tell you that they are charging exorbitant prices for those light meters. Like even the DP for apple cider vinegar, he said that he doesn't really use light meters anymore. Okay, so that's been the half stop grid cloth and now the full stop diffusion from Westcott. So now let's actually put on an extreme example, muslin. The muslin is like stops down on something crazy like over 2 stops of light loss. So let's put that on just to demonstrate why that's not something that you use when you're doing outdoor shoots with the sun. Yeah, that's like the more diffuse something is, the more indoorsy they're meant to be for. Oh yeah, this is what I'm talking about. A few things. See how much darker I am compared to the background, which has remained the same compared to the previous 2 configurations. Like muslin is something that you use when you're wanting to like evoke a sort of warm, fuzzy feeling kind of lighting, and you're wanting to really diffuse the light through some really like thick material. I guess depending on what you want to do, you may or may not want to make your subjects already like warmer than what reality already is, by the fact that you're imparting warmth onto the subject. And also too, against the big bright outdoors, because you're not diffusing those parts of the scenery, you're just like making this space in reality the diffuse part. If you're making me very dark compared to the bright background, unless you have some huge like overhead fixture that's gonna block out the entire hillside, the entire district, maximum diffusion is not what you want to go for. I mean, heck, let's actually add a 4th one. Let's actually add a 4th configuration where I put on the half stop diff over there on top of this unbleached muslin. Actually, let's just to really drive the point home that maximum diffusion when it comes to shooting outdoors, asterisk, is not the way you want to operate. Okay, impromptu configuration number 4. Yeah, this is with muslin and full stop silk. And as you can see, I am so silhouetted compared to the background. Again, bear in mind, the sun has moved. It's like at the beginning of this video, the sun was coming on from a more front on, but now it's getting more and more overhead as we approach noon. Okay, future Martin here. I didn't adequately explain why it's problematic if you are silhouetted compared to the background, right? Because let's take this black. Let's just, for an extreme example, say that I've had this much diffusion applied to me, the subject, right? Okay, so as I've explained, oh no, too much diffusion equals too underexposed subject. So what can you do? Well, one thing you can do is to compensate in camera by opening up the aperture. But look what happens. Oh no, oh no, oh dear. I'm correctly exposed, but look what's happened to the background. Yeah, it's gone completely nuclear. It's completely clipped to white. That's the ultimate catch-22. It's that like if you have too much diffusion on, you lose too many stops of light on your subject. And when you lose too much stops of light on your subject, you end up having to compensate in post or in camera by raising the exposure until your subject's exposure is correct. But the consequence of that is a blown out background, because you've made the exposure difference between your subject and your background too large of a range. You got to give the dynamic range a fighting chance. Versus, let's bring out the diffusion in this 5-in-1 thing. Let's use this one, which doesn't cut down on as much stops of light as my blacks did there, which I was using for demonstration purposes. See, okay, so now I've got the diffusion on. I'm not sure how many stops of light that cuts down on. If I was to now expose for my skin by closing down the aperture. You know what? Let me just give me a sec. Let's keep the aperture thereabouts the same and just use the ND. Okay, so you see, it's like now I'm exposed, but the background is not as blown out. In conclusion, the takeaway is that you want to diffuse the sunlight just enough that you're taking the edge off those harsh shadows, but not so much that you're making your subject too underexposed relative to the bright background. That's the takeaway. And you wouldn't want your character to look like a character that hasn't been unlocked yet. And as I've shown you, there exist fabrics that don't cut down on too much stops of light, but still diffuses it quite adequately. Hope you found this video educational. Hope you found this video educational. Yeah, it's extremely hot, so that's actually a very fitting that I do this right now before Australia heads into the colder seasons. Had a lot of fun doing it. Definitely some techniques that I wish I knew back in my old videos. I mean, like in the skit video where I had like a wide shot of me, Michael, and Luke here, and I only had those like cheap 5-in-1 diffusions that only barely covered one person.
She's not gonna see that.
Alright. And you couldn't angle them because they were just flex. I know a DP that just would insist on using those like flimsy, sort of like flabby 5-in-1s and not use these. It's like, well, what if you need to start angling stuff? You know, I don't want to just Hollywood this thing the whole time. Oh wow, just as I'm filming my outro, the cloud, like this huge cloud just like goes over the sun. Anyways, yeah, thanks for watching and keep on procrastinating. See ya.